I think we're very much a secret building, and we're housing a lot of Vancouver secrets. Most of the vaults and a lot of our public space is actually semi-underground.
A lot of people might sort of have heard of us, but they don't really know we exist.
City Vancouver Archives is the oldest municipal archives in English Canada, founded essentially in 1933 when Major James Skett Matthews was appointed city archivist. We're in the main vault here at the City of Vancouver Archives. This is where the bulk of the 9 kilometers of records that we have in the holdings are kept. About 1.5 million, and counting photographic negatives and prints. Over 100,000 maps and architectural drawings, and probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4,000 audiovisual works and sound recordings. We're no stranger or weirder than any other archives in the country, but I think Major Matthews certainly put his own spin on how we do things here and on the collection we've inherited.
Major Matthews, I brought you the file on Texada Island.
That report is authentic. Thank you, Mrs. Gibbs.
Major Matthews was the first city archivist. He was born in 1878 in a small wool mill town in Wales.
Well, sir, we want to know, what's that red thing over there?
Oh, that? Oh, that was used to measure out the gasoline in British Columbia's first service station.
He decided he would go and seek his fortune in America. Shortly after he arrived in Vancouver, he got a job as a clerk with Imperial Oil. At about the same time that Matthews joined Imperial Oil, he started collecting Vancouver memorabilia almost as soon as he landed. It was in the 1920s when he said goodbye to Imperial Oil and really focused full-time. He wasn't too clear on how he was going to make money doing this, but his attention really turned to his collection. And he started lobbying to find an official way of looking after the artifacts and the documents that he had collected.
The city of Vancouver didn't really see the value in what he was doing, but he basically pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed.
The city, in response, decided that they would give him some space, and in 1933 officially appointed him city archivist. This is a sugar cube from BC Sugar that Matthews acquired at the Diamond Jubilee commemorative lunch in 1946. It's odd enough that he acquired a sugar cube and thought it was worth preserving, but it's a BC Sugar cube, and BC Sugar was one of the very early businesses in Vancouver. He's in the note saying he's a little uncertain and feeling a bit badly about acquiring or taking the sugar cube for display purposes because it's 1946, just post-war. Vancouver's still rationing, and so he is expressing concern that perhaps he shouldn't take it for such a frivolous purpose, but he did. It speaks to Matthew's need to document everything. The other thing is a relic from 1939. It represents the visit of King George VI and the Queen when they visited the city in 1939. And apparently the crowd was getting a little bit restless. The King and Queen were spending a bit too much time up in City Hall with the mayor. And so the King promptly butted out his cigarette, and the King and Queen went down, and the mayor's assistant secretary picked up the cigarette butt, and what Mrs. Hilda Pinder Moss did was give it to Matthews. So this is the royal cigarette butt. I think probably the weirdest thing that Matthews acquired.
This really unassuming looking book, this is one of the oldest surviving accounting records from the city. Virtually everything in this vault is unique and irreplaceable. If the library burns down, the library goes and buys more books. If this building were to burn down, almost nothing in this vault would be replaceable.
Something that we actually have a lot of here too is proposals for things that never went through. So there are lots of alternate visions of the city that exist here. This was a proposal for how the Strathcona area would be totally overhauled. What you can see when you look at this is all the heritage houses there that are really highly valued now are all completely gone, have been replaced with some row houses and walk-up apartments and some of these triangular high-rise buildings as well. So it's a very kind of mid-century planning mentality, kind of total overhaul of the area.
The strangest thing, which is actually from the Major Matthews collection, not surprisingly, is a reproduction of a painting from New Zealand. And it's actually quite ugly, and it sort of defines not politically correct depictions of First Nations peoples anywhere in the world. I was just looking at it with Heather the other day, and it was like, wow, do we really want to keep this? This is really awful. And I was like, no, it's in the Matthews collection. This was something that he thought was interesting, and so we kept it.
Matthew's personality is certainly one that he would be called irascible. He's been called cranky.
The key thing is he was just this humongous presence, and he didn't take no for an answer. It's no, we're going to do this, I want to do this, and the city's like, no, you can't do this. Well, I am doing this.
Throughout the 1930s and the 1950s, he continually had arguments about space. He never really wanted to get along with the councillors and with the city staff. And in 1938, Matthews was convinced to sign an agreement where the management of the collection was placed under the jurisdiction of the Archives Committee. But one of the conditions, one of the terms of reference of that committee was that the city archivist had the authority to dispose of anything in the collection. In 1970, with Matthews' death, he wrote his will such that he didn't give the city permission to dispose of the collection in any way unless they built a proper building for it. The city saw an opportunity to bring the city records and the private sector records in Matthews' collection together. And the building they built is the one we're sitting in today. It's actually named after Major Matthews. It opened in 1972 on December 31st.
He definitely did not operate like a contemporary archivist at all. It was very much his hand on everything, so he would sometimes write things in the margins about what happened to somebody after this.
His classification system was just bananas. He invented his own cataloging system, so you had to know that STR was a street, but then there might be a B and a P, which was a building, but then he might add some other little things.
There's a lot of side kind of talk around the records, which is definitely not something we do now.
So this is a map of the city of Vancouver. It's pretty old. You can see that False Creek hasn't been filled in yet. And we'd like to digitize it, but before we do that, it needs to be clean. And all these tears need to be secured. Thankfully, most of the records that we get from the city are in pretty good condition, but we get things out of some pretty scary looking places. We have had some public sector records that were really important, but were like in a big block and held together with mold. So they had to be peeled away very carefully and washed and held together so that they could be read. That took me months. You don't always think that paper can be thrown into water, and I don't throw it into the water. It's definitely delicate when it's wet, but all these pages are supported by polyester. It's kind of like lining in a suit. So it can get washed in water and then safely pulled out of the water, and then it can be dried.
I have always loved textual records. This one is the very first council minute book for the city of Vancouver from May 10th, 1886. And to be able to touch something that was written that long ago to me is really, really amazing. The purpose of an archives is first and foremost to preserve whatever records it's responsible for acquiring, but also to make them accessible to the public.
People do research on all kinds of things. One thing that's important to understand about the work of archivists is that we don't interpret the records for you. There's an aim to be objective in how we deal with the records. Our role is just to preserve them as they are and make sure that what you look at today is the same thing that somebody else would look at in 200 years.
If he hadn't collected what he did, Vancouver would not have that part of its history documented.
He was a bully, he collected stuff, he badgered people. But it creates the foundation of the archives. The only reason that I get to do what I do is that he collected a bunch of stuff, which allows us to do the much larger picture of both recent history and go back into the pre-settlement era.
We would not have this building if it hadn't been for Matthews and his passionate belief in the archives needing its own building and its own identity. And I don't think the history of the archives would be as interesting if we couldn't have him to point to and look back on and tell stories about.